Welcome to Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo, brought to you by Holy Chuck Burgers. Our business is burgers.
Good morning, Katarina Witt. There's no such thing as bad boys, only boys with bad hair.
Sponsored by Maxwell's Clothiers, your bespoke tailor since 1961. And now, your host of Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo, Chuck Bastie. And welcome everyone to the new and improved Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo, sponsored by Holy Chuck Burger. I am your producer, Cam LaRock, and with always, I am with Chuck Bastie, our host. Chuck, how's it going?
And how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm over the moon today for our guests.
Yeah, as am I.
You might be a little too young to remember Paul Hendrick, because you're just a young little guy as well. But
I got little memories of Paul, but maybe not someone as yourself would remember him. But I definitely recognize the voice.
Yeah, I mean, Paul's been a legend for Leafs TV for the last quarter of a century as well. And he's been, and more importantly, he's just been a wonderful role model, an educator and teacher in the broadcasting world. And what I wanted to do with the show today is take people like yourself at Fanshawe College and any radio broadcasting and really just learn from the best, because Paul Hendrick, in my opinion, is a fantastic storyteller. And I'm really sorry that we've lost him. Everybody has to move on, and Paul's retired on, but I think we can learn still so much from Paul Hendrick as well. So I'm just over the moon to have him on the show today.
Yeah, as am I. Paul was with the Leafs for over 25 years. He spent over 40 years in broadcasting, and I think without further ado, it's time to bring Paul into the show.
All right.
There's Paul. How's it going, Paul?
Good. Hola from Madrid, Spain. We've had the privilege of hanging out here for the last couple of months, watching a lot of soccer, enjoying the warm weather, and watching Maple Leaf hockey and the wee hours of the morning. It's like jet lag 3 nights a week, but it's something I'm not going to miss, given how exciting it is to watch this current edition of the Blue and White guys.
Yeah, honestly, Paul, I'm a little jealous that it's a nice spring day here in March in Ontario, but it's probably not going to be the balmy temperatures you're going to get in Spain. And very jealous of that game you get to see with Real Madrid versus Barcelona as well. I know it wasn't the outcome that you wanted to, but you being a Leafs fan, you must be used to disappointment by now.
Yeah, I guess I am. I mean, I was 10 years old, Chuck, the last time they won the Stanley Cup, and I remember it like it was yesterday, living up in Noranda, Quebec, altar boy at Blessed Sacrament Parish. A couple of years later, I was the altar boy at Dave Keon's dad's funeral, and I got to meet Dave 10 days after he won the Stanley Cup in '67 and was awarded the Conn Smythe Trophy. And my sister's best friend, Christine Hillman, her uncle is Dave Keon, and I got a chance to go over there and meet Dave in person, and it was a thrill I'll always remember. And again, we move on, but those seeds that are planted as a kid, even now as a 66-year-old, have never left me.
That's awesome. I'm overjoyed that you've taken the time to come from Spain today, through our link online, to have you on board as well too. So without further ado, let's jump into the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, it's an honor to be here. I'll leave you guys to it.
Thanks, Cam.
So one of the things I want to start off with, Paul, is just a little introduction to my experience of first meeting you as well, at the Air Canada Centre at the time. I always say to people, it's very much like college, your very first day down in the Big Boy Centre. So I remember going down the Air Canada Centre, taking my media credential pass, and I didn't know a lot of the people that were down there, the usual suspects. I was fortunate enough to play hockey with Bob McGill and Mark Osborne, and they were the guys that got me the introduction into that world. But obviously going down the tunnel, going down in the dressing rooms, in the coffee room as well, you get to see the people that you grew up watching on TV, and there you were. And I remember the very first conversation I had with you, I was very apprehensive to approach you because it's game day, skate, and everybody's busy, and you've got a very specific routine that you follow as well, and you're so busy there. But I'll never forget the time that you took with me, because I just introduced myself to you, and I just said, by the way, something really funny. I've got a beta cassette with you from like 1992 for a men's volleyball tournament at McMaster Marauders with Mike Chalupka, my friend, playing in that game. And you're like, Chuck, was that run by Reg Miller? And I'm just like, that was 25 years ago. How do you remember that? And like your encyclopedic memory just went to a whole nother level there. And it really, it broke the ice for me. And from that point there, you just, whenever I had a question or whenever I had, hey, what do we do? Or what's the routine around here? Or what's the protocol? Or whatever like that. I just sat back and watched a little bit, but you were always so great with just kind of giving me that insight or saying where to go or where to take the elevator up to the media box or whatever like that too. So I just want to thank you for that.
Well, thanks, Chuck. It never hurts to be nice to people. It doesn't cost you a darn thing. I know how intimidating that situation can be there, and I've often seen Ryerson students who are there on a day pass doing a school project, and trying to get them in as closely as you can to the beginning of the scrum before a head coach comes out, just to make them feel welcome and inclusive. And I go back to my days starting with the Leafs back in the mid 90s, and what Toronto Star journalist Frank Orr meant to me, and just how kind he was to me. And I'll never forget that, coming into the room, or at least to Maple Leaf Gardens, then feeling the same way you did, but knowing Frank coming over, complimenting me on my work at Channel 11. I don't know whether he was truthful or not about it, but it made me feel like I was on top of the world, and it just took an edge off. And Frank is that example to me. I was glad to be that example to you.
Oh, thanks, Paul. I mean, like that, and I can't tell you, like you have a lot of anxiety going down there as well. And Nick Kiprios was amazing down there. Glenn Healy, all the other guys as well were very, very helpful as well. And well, obviously Mark Osborne and Big Daddy Bob McGill as well, who obviously you spent a lot of time with. But I want to start back and go to the very beginning of when you first started broadcasting, what you wanted to do as a young person, coming out of school, how you got there. Just kind of give us a little synopsis of your journey into broadcasting in the very beginning for you.
Well, I was at the University of Toronto from 1975 to 79. I'll make this quick. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. My daughter's a lawyer now, and I know how hard she's worked. I was in nowhere anyway near the capacity to accomplish that. I wrote the LSAT without preparation. I think I got the second lowest LSAT score in the history of the province, and realized that no, maybe what I want to do is to get into broadcasting, whether it be radio or television. And I ended up applying to Ryerson. I got in, but my interview at Ryerson, the counselor said, "You've just spent 4 years at the University of Toronto. Why do you want to spend another 4 years? Just go get some experience somewhere, whether it be at cable or maybe apply to a station up north." And I ended up going to a college called Career Canada. It wasn't really a great broadcast school, but in 6 weeks, I ended up sending out tapes, and I got a job in Sault Ste. Marie working TV and radio. I was there for 2 years and 3 months, 1 year covering news, the other time covering the Sioux Greyhounds, Ron Francis, Doug Shedden, and go on and on, John Van Beesbrook. And eventually got a job in Hamilton, and then from Hamilton 17 years later getting my job covering the Toronto Maple Leafs. And 41 years all total, it was time to hang them up and go on to other priorities and in another direction. But that's it in a nutshell. I had the greatest sense of adventure, so much fun covering a variety of different sports, whether it be Reg Miller and his McMaster Marauder, a volleyball team, university sports. I can go on and on. It was fantastic covering high school office sports. Channel 11 provided all of that. It's just a love of the job, love of people, and now here we are. And so I'm going to try to keep that within 60 to 65 seconds, but truly blessed to get to do what I got to do, Chuck.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for people to say, oh, well, that's Paul Hendrick. He's been with Leafs TV for 20 years. It's the crown jewel of the NHL. There is no bigger sports franchise in North America than the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he made it. But people don't see that it took 10 years to be an overnight success to be that anchor at Leafs TV. So I just want to give you an opportunity just to kind of talk about, and speaking to the students that are watching this as well, or people who are aspiring to go into your trade as well, like what you had to persevere through, because obviously it wasn't easy. And there was things that you had to learn, and what you did learn, was the reason why you ended up becoming the anchor for Leafs TV for so many years.
Yeah, the bottom line is you've got to work hard. Obviously, there's got to be some talent involved. You've got to have that, but you've got to work with that talent, and you've got to prepare. You've got to know what you're talking about. I remember a scrum at Air Canada Centre, and this college student who had a chance to ask. It might have been a Buffalo coach. I forget what it was, but it was a terrible, terrible, just open-ended question that didn't really have much relevance. And I just, with all kindness, I pulled him aside afterwards and I said, "You've got an opportunity to be amongst this group. Come in with at least two good questions prepared. Come in and don't waste the coach's time. Don't waste any of our time. You've got to be better than what you just were." But I think he was just enamored by the moment, the opportunity to be where he was without actually doing the groundwork. So to get back to where we were all started, just preparation. I remember changing a flat tire just above the Trans-Canada from Espanola to Elliott Lake, getting ready to do junior B hockey for the Wawa Travelers. I used to do their road games when I was based out of Sault Ste. Marie. There it was, middle of January, myself and my late friend Warren West changing a flat tire 2.5 hours prior to game time. Those are the stories that come up that remind me of just how grateful I was to get to do what I got to do. $25 a broadcast. Money was not a factor. Never asked how much I was going to get paid. Well, you just move on. It just wasn't a factor. It was the opportunity to get to do the job. The financial awards certainly came much later, but you can't get to that point without doing the other stuff to lay the bricks to the foundation early on in one's career. And that goes for all the people in all our business. Whatever we do, you've got to persevere and work hard. Just do your homework.
One of the things that you were always really great with is just doing your homework. Like you said the word preparation in your reply there as well. But one of the things, and I mean, like you've kind of opened up a big can of worms for me on this one, because this is something that drives me crazy. I always say that if it takes 10,000 hours of mastery, to be something wonderful at your trade, and then if you want to be, an elite level hockey player, add another 10,000 hours to that. And then, what makes me cringe is when you see media people asking the same dumb questions over again. How do you feel about that loss out there? And you never asked any of those silly questions. I mean, you were actually the one guy that I modeled anything that I wanted to ask questions about, because I'll give you an example for how this occurred to me. I was watching Wimbledon. This is like 10 years ago, and Andy Roddick did not get broken one time against Federer, and he loses Wimbledon in extra sets in the fifth set. And John McEnroe, who obviously was a great tennis player, was interviewing Roddick after that game, knowing full well what it's like to lose Wimbledon, in historically, to be the first person and only person to never be broken and still lose Wimbledon. And he came up with a question, as opposed to saying, how did that make you feel, or what's going through your mind right now, and just keeping it open-ended for the guy. McEnroe came up because he's got empathy, and he understands what it's like to be in that situation, and what that person would want that reporter to ask him, as opposed to what the reporter brought to the table. And he changed the entire game, as far as reporting goes, because he just said to Roddick, "Hey, listen, I've been in your situation. I know what it feels like as well. You did a hell of a game. Just your thoughts on, what you've learned from the set," or whatever that was. And that to me was real media people having empathy, being able to understand what that athlete's going for. Everything's firing in their brains right now after a loss, more heartbroken than they've probably ever been in their life. And you as a reporter have to ask them that tough question. So how did you approach that?
Well, I worked for the latter part of my career for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, and it was a fine edge to ponder on. And you've got to maintain your credibility. You've got to ask certain questions that justify what may have happened in the moment without sidestepping the issue. And I know I had my critics, but I always believed that there is a proper way to ask a question. It's to ask it with respect. And if you ask it with respect, you are going to get the proper answer. And I've told the story, a number of times. And it's Luke Shen, who's now just joined the team. And Leafs had lost 7, 8 games in a row. It was a Monday night game against Florida. The ice is still freshly flooded when the opening shift begins. Luke gets caught going up ice as the puck to get the puck. It stops in the water. He skates just past it barely. The Panthers come, score. Opening minute of play. Final minute of play. Leafs are down 1-0 still. Luke's on the ice. Panthers score again, and Luke's dash 2. He was our guest book for that first period intermission. My producer, Mark Askin's in my ear, is saying, don't be surprised if he blows you off. And I said, I know Luke, he won't blow me off. And so I've got to think of a way, okay, how am I going to ask this question? It's just obvious. He had a horrendous first period. The team's not doing well. So I just thought, let's ask with respect. And I asked Luke, and I said, as he pulled up to me, and it's live, what has happened has happened. How do you and your teammates regroup inside the dressing room right now to turn things around over the course of the next 40 minutes? So I took it off of Luke and I put it on to his teammates and himself. To Luke's credit, he said, this isn't about my teammates. This is about how I performed in that opening period. I've got to go inside that dressing room and I've got to apologize to each and every one of my teammates. Now, the Leafs didn't win the game that night, but it told me a lot about Luke and a lot that I'd already known, that he's a class act, but he appreciated the respect given to him as opposed to, well, you're not going to do it. No, that was a crap period. How do you explain yourself? Like, I mean, you don't have to do it that way. He's a professional hockey player. All these players in the NHL are of the very best in the world. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. And it's like anything, Chuck. Just treat people with respect. You'll get the answers you want. I can remember on a finger or two how many bad interviews I had over the course of my career. And Luke was not one of them.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've always learned from you, Paul, because like I remember one time you had Justin Applicator in the dressing room from the Wings as well, and I've never seen a guy be more gleeful to be interviewed than he was. Like when you were walking into the room and you've got your interns with you and your light people, and you know, and I just kind of sat in the visiting dressing room just to kind of watch that go by, and then you pumped them with things that a regular reporter wouldn't have done about where he played his junior hockey, where he grew up. And then because you'd done your research, you'd done your preparation. Mm-hmm. And more importantly, to your credit, and I don't know if anybody's ever seen this besides me and said this, but you told the people around you what you were doing. So that way they would learn. And you were teaching people out of a page of your own, beats per se, of like, this is why we do this. This is the purpose of doing that. This is why every single, NHL player that you ever interviewed, would always go in with their cortisol levels just down because they knew the zinger wasn't coming. They knew that you had their back. They knew that you respected them and that you were out to do a good job and you were there to like make them look good, do your job like a professional, get the interview. But at the same time, you weren't looking for the zinger out there to hurt those guys as well. And then you got the best out of every single person that you ever interviewed, which is the reason why I think you only had one or two, say, not great interviews of your career.
Yeah, and I think of Justin Abdelkader, I'm just going off the top of my head, Michigan Peninsula guy. I stayed a Michigan high school hockey champion, grew up cheering for the Detroit Red Wings, got to play for the Detroit Red Wings, just a solid person. And when they realize that you've put some work into them in terms of what their autobiographical history is about, maybe finding a nugget, they appreciate it. I remember doing an interview, a sit down with Matthew Dumba on game day, and talking about Matthew's grandmother who had adopted, I think it was 7 kids in all different nationalities, to the point when they get together for a family reunion, the United Nations can't even compete with what the Dumbas can bring to the equation. And his eyes opened right up, and he was so not relieved, but he was impressed, he was gratified, and we had an incredible interview, and it ran on our pregame show that night. And 2 days later, on the big screen in St. Paul, Minnesota, they ran the interview as well. It was so well accepted by Matthew. And to me, walking out of that room and looking at my cameraman, Matt Andrews, and going, Matt, whoa, we just hit a home run with that. But Matthew was always there for me whenever Minnesota played Toronto. Always, always, always there. And that gets around to the other players that you're not going to get ambushed here in any way. You're going to be story told to death for
Yeah.
what it is. We're going to talk about you. We're going to talk about you growing up. We're going to talk about your mom and dad. Steve Chiasson growing up and outside of Quebec City, going to Lake Placid, New York for high school, not speaking a word of English, and then a few years later, Stanley Cup champion with the Washington Capitals. Those are stories I love so much. And Patrice Bergeron, same story. No English, growing up out of suburban Quebec City, and now he's just one of the class acts. Those are the fun interviews to do. And when you sit down and you've got your homework in front of you and it's all done, you've got 5 to 7 minutes of a lot of fun. And these players all respond so well because they can all speak so well.
I just can't wipe the smile off my face right now, because like for me, when I was down there in the trenches, in the visiting dressing room or the Leafs room or the hallway, or even out in the game day skates when you come up the stairs, say hi to everybody. Like I just loved watching it perform and just be in character. And you were really, really busy. You've got a really strict routine. I know that you're very meticulous with how you do things on game day skates, and it's a busy day as well. But I'll try stop smiling from this as well, because it's like my first year there was a big learning curve as well. I remember one time I was in the bathroom, my very first day, just down from the Leafs dressing room, and Mark Osborne comes into the dressing room, and I said to Mark, I'm like, Mark, now that I got here, what do I do? And he's just like, Chuck, it's a great question you asked that. I would be of the opinion that if you came into this role and didn't say anything to anybody for 3 months, that would be wonderful. And I'm just like, yeah, that's like, but like, I'm a really, really long-winded kind of guy. Like, I like to talk. There's no shortage of that in my character. And he just said, yeah, Chuck, just let them see you. You've got really distinct hair. They can see you. Just let them know you're there. And then just introduce yourself and walk around. And then literally about 40 seconds later, I was walking into the Leafs dressing room, went to the backside of the bathroom there. I didn't know the rule that you weren't allowed to be on the tile and that you had to stay on the carpet. There. Yeah. And I saw Steve Kia go around the corner there, and I need to get my game day. My first day, I don't know where I get my credentials and all this stuff for the night. So he goes in the dressing room in the bathroom, and I went to go chase him, and he disappears. And I'm looking around, and next thing I know, I got this big tap on my shoulder, and it's Steve Keogh. I'm like, hey, you're Steve. He's just like, you're not allowed in there. And I'm like, and I look over, and there's Mark Osborne with Bob McGill, and they're both just shaking their head like this, going, 40 seconds. We just had this conversation 40 seconds ago, and you just now get manhandled by Steve Keogh, the director of PR for the Leafs. So that was a tough learning experience as well. So I want to segue before we go, just do a little kind of like, this is your life kind of segment. We've got these pictures that we want to go down, where I'll have Cam bring up the slideshow. And I just want to get your thoughts on each one of them. Take your time, and then we'll flip them as well. Just tell them what we're looking at here. Obviously, I think I know what they are, but there's obviously a story behind every picture where you can just say, hey, listen, this is a great memory of when I was like freezing my balls off, in front of, 30,000 people outside at the outdoor game or whatever that is. But we'll have Cam bring them up. There is a young Paul Hendrick right there. How old are we there?
19, I'm going to say 26, 27 years old. To Weekend Sports and News, that's the legendary Norm Marshall, who is beside me. He did the first ever Grey Cups on CBC television back in the early 1950s. Just a legend of a man. I got to work with him with University Sports, and I replaced him as the play-by-play voice of Ontario University football. And what an honor it was to work with him. He was a guest. He and his wife, Helen, were at my and Alicia's wedding back in 1987. But that's a Sunday night at CHCH in Hamilton back in the early 80s.
The fact that you can remember that blows my mind. Let's just roll these pictures out there. Oh my God, the New York Rangers. Like, I'm a Flyers fan, so I see that my cortisol levels go through the roof right away.
Yeah, what blows me away is my hair. I mean, that's Alexandrian carpet perfect. It's not like that anymore. I got the hash marks now in the middle of my head because age will take away some of that hair. But and the rose, you can't see it. I used to wear a rose on air. I wanted to distinguish myself from Dick Beddoes, who was my boss, our sports director, and I thought I'm going to wear a rose on my lapel. And I stole the idea from the late Bill Patterson, former sports announcer at CJOH Television, CTV affiliate in Ottawa, and he wore a rose on his every night he was on the air. So I had a bunch of roses in a fridge nearby, and I would put it on just to add a touch of class and just distinguish me from my boss, who wore the hat and was very much outlandish and certainly established in the business. But that again is going back to the mid 1980s in our newsroom at Channel 11 in Hamilton.
There's that one quote from the Birdcage.
Now, who's that? Who do you think? Who do you think that is, Chuck? Who do you think I'm interviewing?
Yeah, I have no idea. I want to say Mitch Marner.
No, it's TJ Brody.
Oh,
so Joe Bowen and I are hosting the skills competition at Air Canada Centre, and TJ had won the accuracy shooting contest amongst the kids earlier in the day and was able to come back at invitation to participate with the pros. Behind one side of the net, Brian McCabe, the other was Thomas Cabriolet, and they'd pass in rapid fire succession out to TJ. But all this kid from Chatham needed to finish the deal was hit 4 targets on 4 shots. And I was interviewing him immediately thereafter. TJ's not a very outspoken guy. He wasn't very outspoken on this particular Sunday afternoon, but it's a picture I was very glad to have kept, because lo and behold, years later, he would eventually become a Toronto Maple Leaf.
Well, I just didn't recognize him without the Birdcage there as well. So
yeah, exactly.
This is actually a picture that I took of you. You're gonna have to excuse the quality of that's my BlackBerry from like 2015 or whatever that was. But you were actually you're telling a joke here, and you had kind of a small court of people, and I'm gonna go and revisit this story as well at the end of it, at the end of these pictures as well. But Aki Berg was over my left shoulder, and he was waiting there, and he was big as a house, and you were talking to the people, and I don't know what happened. But as soon as you saw Aki Berg, and you said, Aki, and his face lit up like a Christmas tree. And you guys sat down, and it was just so heartwarming to watch you guys. And it was like, obviously, there's a lot of history there. So I just want to ask you about that.
Yeah, I remember when Aki joined the hockey club in the trade from Los Angeles. I think we were in Long Island, and both of us checking out of the Marriott at the same time that afternoon on a game day. And I introduced myself, and he, like a lot of Finns, very, very shy.
Yeah.
But you get to go through a bunch of ups and downs with him in his career here. But he was just a tremendous person, and still is. And I think at that point in time, he was an assistant equipment guy with the Finnish national team, and he was in Toronto just for a visit. It's great to run into a lot of these players once their careers are done or you have not seen them. I got to visit earlier this season. I'll make this quick. Day of a game. I hadn't been to a game since I had retired, but it was to see the Tampa Bay Lightning just prior to Christmas, and game day skate. And there's Nick Antropov, and I hear the tick, the tapping of the stick on the ice and the wave up. It's nice to run into these people after their careers are done, because I've never forgotten what they've accomplished, and maybe they appreciate the fact that even though others may have forgotten what they've accomplished, some of us haven't. And it was great just to catch up with Aki.
It's funny you say that, because now that you say that, I remember sitting with some of the coaching staff from the Finns that were there, and you're right. I don't know if that was World Juniors or if that was just they were in town or whatever like that too. But yeah, it's funny. Your memory blows me away.
I'm going to say I think that's 2015 probably, and he was with the Finnish national team. The other thing with Aki, I remember him living in Mimico. None of the players lived out there, but there's a lot of park space there, and he had a couple of big not Dobermans, Mastiffs, or I forget what they were, but he had a couple of huge dogs, and he was able to walk his dogs there, and that's why he lives so close to the practice facility in West End, Toronto.
Yeah, but I mean, like you mentioned about Finns, like if you can get an emotional response out of a Finn, you're doing well. So I was just like, wow, like Aki Berg just lit up like a Christmas tree. He's a big boy too, so
he's gotten a lot bigger.
Yeah. So you look cold here.
This is 2 hours 45 minutes into a 3 hour pregame show of the outdoor classic at the Big House in Michigan,
Yeah.
and we were dressed for the occasion. But when you've been at the stadium from I'd say about 7 a.m. and this was about 1 o'clock. I remember interviewing Gary Bettman, and I had to tuck my left arm with the microphone in very tight. Otherwise, I was shaking. Bob, you can see as well, just cold, cold, cold. And Leafs TV did a great job of equipping us for what we needed for the day, but even it wasn't enough. But I'd have to think over the course of my 25 years of covering that hockey club, the opportunity to get to be at that game and cover it and all that went with it was one of the highlights of my career looking back.
That was a cold game. I remember that one, watching that on TV, thinking to myself, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Look at young Nazem Kadri.
So game day, we'd always do either a visiting player or a Leaf player for our profile and our pregame show that evening. Nazem's one of the classiest guys. He's just an outstanding guy. And a lot of times when things were not good for the hockey club, and they weren't, Nazem would never hesitate to talk with us and be very candid about the team and where it was going. And I know he did run into problems in Peter Horachek's final year, daylight savings time where he was out late, came in late for practice the next day. The team was on its way down eventually toward getting Austin Matthews and all those great picks. But as bad as it was, and I know his dad, Sam, read him the riot act, but Nazem responded positively. And to see him a year ago with the Stanley Cup driven above his head, I was so proud of him and I was so pleased. He's another guy that, when I decided to retire, he reached out. And I'll be forever grateful for Nazem. Just a tremendous guy. I wish we still had him.
I remember that day, actually. Brendan actually came down and actually called a meeting, which he never did, to talk about that, for why he was being suspended for that game or for that practice or whatever it was. But I have my Nazem Kadri, my first year. There was a friend of mine, Dana. She had a son named Musa, and they were Muslim, they were Egyptian. And I asked Nazem, I said, hey, listen, this kid's 7 years old. He's just trying to play hockey and just, in the GTHL. And, can you just say a couple nice, kind words to him? And I put my BlackBerry up to him, and he actually said, hey, Musa, this is Nazem Kadri from the Toronto Maple Leafs. Just want to tell you to keep working hard, keep your legs moving. And the look on that kid's face when his identifiable NHL hockey figure, the only one in the NHL that he could identify with as an Egyptian, Muslim, was Nazem Kadri. His mother cried. The fact that he would do something like that as well was very, very grateful for. Good kid.
Yeah, classy guy, Naz. You've just said it all right there. That'll never change. So this is draft in Sunrise, Florida. We're at the stadium before a Marlins game, and a bunch of the guys got to hit the ball, including Mitch Marner. And I remember Mitch's agent, Darren Ferris, a few months later, just concerned with all the critiquing Mitch was receiving about his size. And I said, listen, no worries whatsoever. There are a bunch of players over the course of history who have, and I'm trying to think of the one player who comes to mind. I won a Stanley Cup with St. Louis. It'll come to me in a moment. Former Maple Leaf. Anyway, where size was always... Who?
Bozak?
Yeah, Bozy. It was Bozy. Yeah. Bozy got it all the time about his size and why he was a number one center when he shouldn't have been a number one center, but he was in Toronto. But Tyler got it all the time. And I just said, don't worry. They won't be asking that about Mitch in a couple of years. A, he's going to fill out, but B, his play and talent are going to just speak volumes.
Boy, did you ever miss the mark on that one, Hendrick?
No, I was just going off who, it's just, yeah.
No, I mean about Marner. You're way off on that one because he sucks and he's so terrible and
he's just
terrible.
Listen, that draft, if Mike Babcock had his way, we would have had a defenseman from the Michigan areas now with the Calgary Flames as opposed to Mitch Marner. But thankfully, Mark Hunter just said, no, this guy's staying here and we're drafting him. And now to get that to happen. Yeah, then to get that to happen, Chuck, the Arizona Coyotes had to draft Dylan Strome, a very good family friend of ours who I'm so glad he's been able to land on his feet in Washington to help that hockey club out. But getting the opportunity to draft Mitch was a franchise-changing director, change. So
I think it's also
it all worked out.
It's a little coincidental that the Hunters, happen to be the owners of the London Knights, and that's where the team he played for. So I think that might have been a homer call by the Hunters as well. But yeah.
Well, no, I think let's give Mark credit where credit's due. This is arguably the top right winger in Canada right now.
100%.
I mean, if there's the Olympics, it's Mitch Marner on your top line right side, no worse than second right wing.
Yeah.
So full credit. Otherwise, it would have been Hanifin coming to Toronto. Had Babs, and a good hockey player, but not the impact
Not Mitch Marner.
Mitch Marner's had. Yeah, exactly. Anyway,
I think we got a few more here. Oh boy.
Okay. OUAA football
football
game of the week, and that's at Laurier, University Stadium, Seagram Stadium, which is about to be torn down for a new facility. This would be early 90s, and that's Neil Lumsden, CIAU great, and might be the all-time leading scorer. I haven't checked as of late. And Neil's now a cabinet minister in the provincial government in Ontario, who's working his tail off as hard as he ever did as not only a college player. He went and won, I think, 4 Grey Cups with the Edmonton Eskimos. Tremendous guy, and it was just an awesome opportunity to work with him. Such a talented person. Now displaying those talents as a cabinet minister for Doug Ford at Queen's Park in Toronto.
Is that Jesse's dad?
That's Jesse's dad. It's funny, is that Jesse's dad? No, Neil, like Jesse's a big story, but Neil.
I know, I'm messing with you.
Yeah, okay. That's Jesse's. I'd pick him up. We'd go to do games, and we'll get to this in just a moment. You couldn't open the front door of their house in Burlington with Jesse's running shoes there. I mean, these big, long, size 12 PAs. And he was like 12, 13 years old at the time. So anyway, let's go to this next one. Calder Cup 2018. Look at the tears coming down Travis Dermott's face. He didn't play that game. He had a separated shoulder, but, uniform on for the celebration afterwards. The emotion of winning a championship and to win it for the organization meant so much to Travis. I don't know. I haven't talked to him since being traded to Vancouver. Things happen, but he was absolutely jacked to win a trophy for the organization in Toronto's first professional hockey championship since the Maple Leafs in 1967. That was a hell of a team the Marlies had in 2018.
Dermott there as well, but I gotta chime in with this one because this is one of the greatest quotes that I've read. What he when he learned about your retirement, and I'm going to read this. It says, "In a hockey world that can be very overwhelming at times, you have a knack of making people (brackets, including myself on many occasions on brackets) feel comfortable and confident. You will be dearly missed, Travis McDermott." Travis Dermott. Sorry.
Yeah.
And I thought, honestly, when I read that, of all the people that had wished you well, sent you tweets, I thought that was just really, top shelf, because I thought that, for what he actually said about his experience, about how you made him feel, and I didn't want to have that go by without you being acknowledged for that.
Yeah, I remember his dad and a friend driving all the way from Newmarket to Albany, New York, to see him make his professional hockey debut. Travis was a -2 that night, and his dad and friend watched the game. I remember the conversation with them outside the team bus after the game, and then the two drove off back to Newmarket. It's a good 5-6 hour drive, but we'd have all done the same for one of our kids. Yeah. And I remember saying, listen, your kid's a hell of a hockey player. He's going to be a national hockey leaguer, and you just take what happened here tonight. I mean, I think Erie had just been beaten out, so he might have been 19 years old, 20 years old, playing for the Marlies in Albany. But Derms is one of the great guys. I was doing a voiceover summertime at Ford Performance Center. My head's buried, and we're doing a bunch of different players. It was the season in review, and it came to Dermott, and I just waxing poetically about how great this guy's going to be. Travis and a buddy of his around right at the end. They happened to have been right there. It was just, and I just
saw that.
I said, "Oh my God!"
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
it was
actually,
just a
and
genuine
he
moment.
surprised you too.
He did. But I saw a shadow out of the corner of my eye, but I wanted to finish this read because we had a lot of them to do, and there it was. That was a really good moment. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
actually, that was
big
quite
heart for
funny
that
when I
guy.
saw that.
Yeah.
I think we get a few more here.
Yeah,
None?
OUA football. That is, that's University of Toronto, and we're at Varsity Stadium. And this is when I was on the sidelines before Norm Marshall retired. So I'm going to say this is 1984. And I'm not sure who that player from the University of Toronto is, but it was just great to get the access we did. The league appreciated the coverage we did. It was Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock until daylight savings time. And then the games began at 1 o'clock. And whether it be football or basketball or a variety of other sports, we generated a great local audience, all Canadian content, all kids who grew up in our backyard. And it's awesome to run into these guys later on in their lives now with their kids at various events. And, often they're saying, hey, tell my kid just how great I was. True.
Yeah, because the older that we get, the more our kids don't believe us. Like, your dad was a big deal. I'm kind of a big deal. And like my kid goes, no, Daddy, you're not a big deal at all. Nobody likes you. Nobody cares. And you're just like, and then you have to go over the top and say, well, let me bring in the evidence and let me bring in no. Like still, it doesn't make a difference. So I think we got one or two more left. There's you with Lou.
Yeah, Lou, first day, and we were having a talk about him growing up in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm the son of Sicilian immigrants, and how hard his mom and dad worked to make a living for he and his siblings, and here we are. One of the classiest guys. Lou will always be, tagged with the guy that makes players get haircuts and beards. Joe, Jim, myself. Nicole Burns, our producer, we were all bounced off the Leaf charter because Lou doesn't believe on any media, whether we're team or not, to be on the charter. I totally respected the decision. It wasn't personal for Lou. It was strictly business. He's just a great man. He's in the Hall of Fame for a reason. And even though he's in the Hall of Fame for hockey, he's in my Hall of Fame as a first ballot person because of who he is as a person.
I remember that decision came down. I was talking to Ralphie upstairs, and he was talking about how you got bounced off the charters, and you guys had to make your own way as well. And I was like, wow, that's a bold strategy by Lou.
Yeah, it was 2015. I remember that training camp day when we found out. That was the day Verhaeghe, there was all 5 or 6 Leafs got traded. The Leafs were bottoming out to put themselves in a position to get Austin Matthews. Simply put.
Well done.
Well done. Hey, well played. Listen, team's trying to get Connor Bedard. I hope Montreal gets him. And if not Montreal, I hope Ottawa gets him, strictly to revive these rivalries in Eastern Canada. And just what it would mean to those franchises, knowing what Austin has meant to the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah. I think we get one or two left here. Look at the hair on that guy. Oh, my good God.
Yeah.
I mean, and yours isn't bad either.
Exactly.
So the funny thing about this picture here is I had just had a picture with Brian Burke just before you came down. And Berkey, as surly as Berkey can be, he did not smile. And I just said, come on, Brian, let's have another picture. Smile. He's like, this is my smile. So, like for the fact that you came down there, you actually smiled as well. Thank you for that. It didn't often happen.
Berkey, I remember my daughter was in law school at the University of Windsor and Detroit Mercy. She was in the dual program, and she wrote a paper on the collective bargaining agreement. And Berkey was good enough to read it, edit, make some corrections and suggestions.
Yeah.
Brian's got a heart of gold. So that scowl you'll often see. No, he's a generous man.
I've been on both sides of that scowl. I've been on the side where he's given me 20 minutes and we've talked about non-hockey things, and we've just, talked about life and his kids and, everything, non-hockey. And then I've had on the other side where I called him a couple of weeks ago and had a phone conversation that didn't go very well. And, that's Brian Burke. And I got to tell him, like, hey, listen, you project a really big shadow. And I don't want to call you. I don't want to call Brian Burke here and have this conversation, but, this is what it is. But, just like I always say, Brian is always firm, but he's fair. And if he says no, he means no. And I've never seen as much as what Brian has done in charities, in communities, and what he does. I think he's doing a fantastic job in Pittsburgh. And he's in the right role as president. So that way he's not just in hockey operations, he's in community.
Yeah, exactly. He came on my podcast. We talked about his book, and he was very generous with his time. I had to ask him about the passing of his son Brendan. It's a critical chapter in the book, and I kind of wish I didn't ask, but Brian was very good. But I had to bring it up and talk about it. I know we were in New Jersey that night, and Lou storming into the Leaf room to see Ron Wilson. None of us knew until we got on one of the 2 team buses headed to the airport to fly home, and the team chartered that particular evening. And you know, Pat Park, the Leaf public relations chief back then, texting us all as to what had happened. It's a void that will never be filled. It was just unfortunate. And Brian, of course, was in London that particular night scouting Nazem Kadri. So anyway.
Yeah, and then just 2 weeks later or whatever it was, the Olympics, came up, and he's got to put all that down, carry all that grief, and go to Vancouver and be the GM for the U.S. Olympic team. I can't even imagine, like I always say, like, some people say, I want to go to the NHL. I want to get to that point, that pinnacle of whatever it is. But most people don't see those stories, that what you've got to deal with at that level. That's 10 times more. And then you're in the spotlight as well. And Brian did a wonderful job of really sharing that experience about his son, about Brendan as well. And I think he's done wonderful things with You Can Play as well. And moving forward as well with Pride in Toronto as well. And, he's an advocate. And when he says something, it commands that you listen to it, because it's Brian Burke. But again, firm but fair, I think, with Berkey.
He addressed us in St. Louis a week or so. It was the last game before the Olympics, and he addressed us in St. Louis before heading off to join Team USA. And had Sydney not scored that goal to beat the Americans, I would have been more than fine with the Americans winning that medal. A, for Brian, B, for Ron Wilson.
Yeah, bittersweet for sure.
Yeah.
And I think we got one last picture here. Oh, God. So, and you know what? I got to preface this as well. Yeah, because this is, I took this picture of you and Joey Connors as well. This was, I want to say it was 2019. This was one of the best days I think I've ever been around NHL hockey for so many reasons. And I got a call from a friend of mine in London, Ontario. Joey was from Mount Bridges, just outside of London there, and said that he had just tested for a really aggressive form of cancer, and asked if I could reach out to the Coyotes, because he was a big OEL guy. He liked the Oliver Ekman-Larsson. And unknowingly to me, when I got down there, Rich, their PR director, came out and he just said, hey, listen, Lawson Krause came out here, and he's from Mount Bridges, and he brought his own jersey. And he wants to meet Joey. And I said, oh, that would be fantastic. And then he comes back, and so Joey's wearing Lawson Krause's jersey there. But I remember going downstairs, because Joey was in the fan shop program for sports journalism as well. And I remember going to you and crazy, and most people who don't know what game day skate is at the Air Canada Centre or Scotiabank, they don't understand the time restraints. Team comes off at 10:30, goes on 11:30. There's dressing room, then there's Babcock or whoever the coach is comes into the press conference, and you got to like really ping pong, and you're bouncing off the walls with your team of people as well. I remember going down there and asking you, hey, listen, there's a kid up here, he's in journalism as well. Would you mind just saying hi to him? And Paul, you took 20 minutes out of a day. You didn't have 20 minutes to give, and really just I don't think Joey really knew the I don't know, the sacrifice that 20 minutes for you on game day skate was. His parents certainly did, and he ended up passing away 3 months after that as well, which was really tragic. And his parents, for that one day, and after you had left, Wendell came down, and we got pictures with him and Wendell, which he was just overjoyed about. And then Glenn Healy and Cujo were down in in the dressing room, and they put on a stand-up comedy routine for Joey while we were waiting for OEL and Lawson Cross to come out after the practice. And I really saw the community aspect of the NHL and how meaningless hockey really is. And don't get me wrong, it takes a lot to put on one of those NHL games, and there's a 1,000 manpower hours that have to go behind it to do it. But at the end of the day, I don't think anybody remembered the score of that game, but they really remembered the experience, especially the Connor family, about taking that time out. So I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah, there's nothing to thank. I remember the day I knew he'd been diagnosed with what he had. I remember you explaining that to me. We could have taken an hour and a half, gone to lunch at Real Sports next door. Yeah, that's sad to remember that story, and good for you for bringing him. And if there was a day that would stand out, and of course Rich Nairn, who's the public relations chief for Arizona, would have done a tremendous job in facilitating all of that. So no surprises in that regard.
Yeah, Rich was a champion. I just spoke to Rich back in November as well, in 4 or 5 months ago, and just again, like if you have an expectation of how you think that could go, he superseded that 4 or 5 times the size of that. And they actually had their film crew as well that picked that all up and then sent us all that footage back for Joey and his parents as well, which made for a huge difference, because at that one moment there, with all the stress that family has on them, they get to escape that for that 3-4 hours of that day, just to check out and just to make things a little less shitty. And then go through that. And again, the Hunter brothers, they came up with inviting Joey down to watch a Guelph game in London, and gave him 10 seats upstairs, and all of his friends, and brought him back downstairs to meet the team. And I think it was 4 weeks after that Joey passed away, and 18 years old kid. So but like, the point of this is what I wanted to say is just how the NHL family really reaches out and curates that connection with its fans and makes it not about hockey.
No. Sidney Crosby, a quick story here. My daughter's lacrosse coach in high school at Lorne Park Secondary, Greg Kelly, his son Ben's a huge Pittsburgh Sydney fan. This was coming out of the lockout, and Greg just said, Penguins are coming possibly here as soon as we know what the schedule is. Any chance you can get us down for a game day skate? So I got Greg, his wife, who unfortunately has passed away a couple of years ago, son Ben, sister Lauren, who went to Notre Dame on a rowing scholarship years later, but she'd been in the hospital at McMaster for several weeks. Anyway, I explained to Tom McMillan, the head of the Pittsburgh Penguins PR staff, now retired, just what was going on. I told them, I've got to interview Chris Kunitz. Do not step any further than where you are. Just the guys will come by. You can fist pump, all that stuff. Anyway, I come back with Chris, the interview's done, and there's Sidney signing the jerseys, one a Team Canada jersey and that Lauren was wearing, and Ben was wearing the Pittsburgh jersey with 87 on it. And Sidney said, hey, are you guys going to the game tonight? And Greg was saying, no, we're heading back to St. Catharines because we couldn't get tickets, which was, tickets are too expensive. Well, anyway, Sidney, through Tom, got 4 tickets, $250 a piece, and they sat at the game as Sidney's guests. And this is the Leafs played like it was a Saturday, and then they played Pittsburgh again in Toronto the following Thursday. And Sidney asked, the kids were just overwhelmed with the generosity. And that's Sidney Crosby. They had a bunch of cards and whatnot written out and drawn up, and I gave those to Sidney the following week. And then anytime we were in Pittsburgh to play the Penguins, Sidney would mention over, how's everything up north? How's the daughter feeling? And anyway, Lauren, she was more than well, and as I said, a rowing scholarship to Notre Dame, and her brother Ben's on a golf scholarship at a small college, I believe, in Pennsylvania right now. They lost their mother a couple of years ago, but I know for Greg, who's just an outstanding coach and teacher at Lorne Park Secondary, this was a day they'll never forget, and it was just so good to be a part of it, help facilitate it. But this was all on Sidney Crosby and Tom, the PR chief of the Pittsburgh Penguins back then.
And that's one of the things I just never really had the interest of, no offense, of covering NHL hockey, because
Yeah.
the other side of the humanity of the sport and the players was too much of a draw for me.
Yeah.
You get to see these guys firsthand behind the scenes making that difference or signing the autographs. And I feel like I won the lottery. That I remember sitting there in the dressing room a couple times, going up and down like a weeble wobble, going, "Oh my God, there's James Reimer, like there's Dion Phaneuf, and like here comes Phil Kessel," and you got to pinch yourself and realize that not everyone gets not only not gets the opportunity to see this, but they don't get to see the humanity side of these players who happen to put a puck in the net or keep a puck out of the net. But when you actually get to talk to them, like the Wayne Simmons of the world, where you actually get to sit with them and just talk about their family and who inspired them, and then watch their face light up like a Christmas tree, talking about who first signed their first autograph and why they do what they do and how they pay it forward as well. And, the stories that you get to see. I remember one time I was sitting there with, I was outside the visiting dressing room. Bobby Orr is right to my left hand side, and I'm like, oh my God, Bobby
Wow.
Orr. This is Robert Gordon Orr, and I'm like, how do I say, hey Bobby? Do you call him Bob? Is it Robert? Like, I've never met Bobby Orr before, and I was sitting there, he's talking to a guy, and I can't interrupt him, and I'm waiting patiently, and then I kind of look, and the Capitals were in town that day, and I was interviewing Holtby. And I'm looking, and there's a slow ghost line coming up. And I look, there's Barry Trotz at the time. And Trotz was fourth in line, because they were all trying to say hi to Bobby Orr, who was standing right next to me. So I go to Trotz. I'm like, hey, Trotz, are you in line for Bobby Orr? He's like, it's Bobby fucking Orr. Like,
Yeah.
and here's the coach of the Washington Capitals. But that's my story. But I wanted to defer to you because I know you've got 1,000 of those, but I thought maybe you kind of give us a short few synopsis of stories like that, that were just really cool moments for Paul Hendrick.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think. I mean, on the spot, there's a bunch, obviously. Hockey-wise, being on the ice with Matt Sundin, I think it was the night he got his 1,000th point, named first, second, and third stars of the game. Being able to do that interview at center ice is a moment I'll never forget. I did the opening and closing ceremonies for so many Molson Indies, and the number of celebrities I got to rub shoulders with, for Gentlemen Start Your Engines. And my, oh my, geez, Chuck, I should have done some prep work. And this is what happens when you get away from it. But the opportunity, well, I remember we going to Harry Neal's place on a midweek afternoon. We weren't doing the game that night. It was on TSN. But we did have a game on the island the next night, and the team was flying out of Buffalo to Long Island, Farmingdale. And so we were at Harry's for the day. We had lunch at the golf club. And then that night, on our way into the rink, it's Daryl Sittler picking Harry, myself, Mark Askin, and I up. I mean, I'd known Daryl often. He lived in our neighborhood in Lorne Park, Mississauga. It was not unusual to see him, but you don't lose a grasp of the fact that this is Daryl Sittler driving you to the game that night. That to me is important. Running into Wayne Gretzky with Bob McGill, we're doing our intros down in one of the vomitoriums there, and Wayne, hey guys, how are you? Interrupts what we were doing, which was more than fine, and we didn't talk any hockey. We talked about his granddaughter, and his son-in-law and daughter Paulina were in Australia for a golf tournament. So the Gretzkys, Janet and Wayne, were looking after the grandkids. And the one granddaughter is 3 years old, doesn't call him Papa or Grandpa. Wayne was complaining. She calls him Wayne. Like, hey Wayne, can I have a chocolate milk or something? So it was kind of nice, to be able to mingle with these incredible legends and talk about stories that would impact each of us. And you as a grandparent, if you had a granddaughter who was 3 and not calling you Grandpa Chuck, but hey Chuck.
Yeah.
And this is Wayne Gretzky, the greatest player ever to grace the planet, and his granddaughter, who I'm sure calls him Papa or whatever it is right now. But back then, nope, he was just Wayne to her.
Yeah, he wasn't a bad one, that guy, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, he was solid.
Or Dustin is his son-in-law as well. Can swing a
Yeah.
pretty mean club as well. So, just before we close, I thought I'd just give you an opportunity just to. I mean, I always say like teachers are the most incredible inspiration. Um, I would like to live in a world where rock stars and athletes don't make millions of dollars and drive limousines and get out and have big fat cigars. And I think that should be teachers that's is the difference they make in our lives. But just in your own life, I just thought I'd give you an opportunity to thank or acknowledge the people who got Paul Hendrick to where he was when Paul Hendrick probably didn't believe in Paul Hendrick, and you had that inspiration behind you or that belief system from somebody else that told you that you could be great or that you can be great or this is how you can be great, and just who you wanted to thank.
Well, my advice, and thank you for those kind words, Chuck. And my son's a teacher. Mike's a second year teacher in Hamilton. We're so proud of him, and he just brings a passion to all. And when his kids walk into his room, their eyes light up because they see the light in his eyes and the confidence that he gives to them to hopefully make their day as good as possible, and ready for learning in that particular day. But the only advice I would say, work hard, do your homework, never say no, and don't ask what you're getting paid. All that will take care of itself. And I know the business is changing. Day after day, we hear of layoffs and whatnot, but the news has to be delivered by some way or fashion. Somebody's got to do that. And if you want it to be you, by all means, go ahead and do it, because why not? Why not be you? But never say no. Never ask what you're getting paid. Just plow ahead. And I know it's not easy in this day and age, given how expensive rents are and all that goes with that, and groceries. But the rest will take care of itself. You've just got to take care of the initial challenges, and keep on marching through. And all of a sudden, 41 years later, your career is going to come to an end, and you're doing shows with Chuck, which is just outstanding.
Yeah, but you're doing it from Spain as well. But anybody that you want to thank or just to acknowledge?
Uh, Carl Sapkowski, news director, who hired me, Scott Matthews up in Sault Ste. Marie, John Best, our news director in Hamilton, Phil LaChapelle, legendary producer out of CBC who just retired, and those people really stand out. Mark Askin, producer with Molson Sports and Entertainment, Ron Harrison Sr. These people all saw something in me, and I'm totally grateful. And Scott Oak and Scott Russell back in the day for turning down a position to work at Molstar to stay at CBC. I was the third choice. And because those two Scots turned down the job, I got an opportunity to move over to the Maple Leafs. So thank you to all those names.
It's funny because you say that you're the third pick, the bronze medal, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But it was funny because I was talking with Dylan Ferguson last night, and he just got called up from the Marlies,
Great story,
traded over to the Senators, and I was talking to him on the phone 3 weeks ago, and he was on a PTO with the Marlies, and he's just like, listen, I'm in a condo downtown, and I'm like, hey, come on, let's take you out for a Holy Chuck burger. You'll get the meat sweats, you'll feel better about this. It'll make everything kind of go away for a little while. But he's just like, nope, I don't need it. I work with Pete Fry, the mindset guy, and I know that I just got to work hard. I'm going to get my shot. And sure enough, I'm watching TV last night, and he gets called up to play against the Penguins. And he really believes that. I mean, if you have that mindset where you're the bronze medal and you're just working hard, you get your shot. And like you say you're the bronze medal, Scott Oak, and passes on that, and you walk into that, and and here's the other thing I'll say is you have to work hard to get your opportunity to make it look like it's an opportunity. If you get your opportunity and you haven't prepared for it, then it sucks, because then you look like an idiot. But then when you've done your preparation, like you said, and you get your shot, then you can really shine. And that's what Dylan Ferguson did last night. Stops 48 shots against Sidney Crosby. Like to win his first first start. He lost his shutout with like six minutes to go in the game. But I just thought I'd use that example as well, because you just never know when you're going to get that opportunity. And as long as you worked hard, you can then capitalize on it.
Yeah, Morgan Riley scored his first NHL goal in that building, and Dylan gets his first National Hockey League win. Certainly in a position with the Marlies where he wasn't able to move on. They just ran out of room, and good for him to get an opportunity. And you mentioned, the luck, opportunity, preparation. You don't get the latter without the other two. So those are nice stories. I hope it continues because he's got an opportunity to do something in Ottawa. They certainly could use some goaltending help, but they're a good hockey team on the horizon of doing great things. They've just got to get better in nets and a little healthier up front.
Yeah. So I wanted to say, when you get back from Spain and you get back to Toronto, our sponsor Johnny Prasulis over at Holy Chuck Burgers wants to take you and the missus out for the Tasty's burger or the veggie burger, if that's what you prefer, because he's got both. But I would be remiss if I didn't offer that off to you as well. I got gift cards for you guys when you get back and you want to have some good old home, not Latin food. Holy Chuck Burgers has been pretty good about giving all of our guests the meat sweats, coming back home as well. And he's got a mean poutine as well. I'm going to tell you right now, like when you go through this, it's not just a burger, it's an experience. So just you need to prepare for this, Paul.
Yeah, I'll make sure I'm in the gym early and often. I've heard nothing but good things, and I'm looking forward to that. And Chuck, I'll indeed take you up on the offer. That'll be fantastic.
Yeah, and Paul, I want to thank you a lot for coming on the show, man. I really respect your work, and more importantly, how kind you've been to not only me but everybody else around you. Like, it wasn't just a me thing. Like, your way of being was across the table with everybody. And I'm sure if I got in a room and I just started telling Paul Hendrick stories, they would all come back with 1,000 other stories of what they've actually experienced watching you work or being a part of your work as well, or just, learning from you as well. And that's the biggest curve. I mean, to me, that's what I think your legacy really leaves, is the amount of lives that you've touched inside of the sport. And I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you for your interest. It's nice to be remembered. I mean, in that, stadium in Barcelona the other night to watch El Clasico, 100,000 fans. Not one of them cared about the Maple Leafs, nor cared about me. It's just amazing on this small little planet that we have. Our interests are so divergent, right? But it's nice to have interests on both sides of the Atlantic. And listen, I'm looking forward to this Leaf season. Whether they win that first round or not, I think they are going to win that first round. But what a ride it has been, and especially since Mitch, Willie, Austin came onto the scene, it's been an outstanding time for Leafs Nation, and I hope it continues deep into the spring. It could be magical. We'll see.
Yeah, and I agree, and I'll keep you to that as well after the playoffs. We'll have you back on the show and just kind of walk you through the season that as well, and kind of keep you a little connected to it as well, and hope to see you then.
All right, as long as it means a second burger, I'm there.
that's on me. That's a given. Thanks, Paul. Really appreciate you coming on board.
Thanks, Chuck.
Be safe in Spain. That's Paul Hendrick. Honestly, just a truly wonderful human being. I'm very, very lucky to actually have been around someone like Paul Hendrick, even in a small capacity. And I just want to thank Paul for coming on the show right now. I'll now bring up our producer, Cam LaRock, and see what Gen X or Gen Z, I'm Gen X, Gen Z says about the interview, his first time as well. I think he did very well out there. And there's the kid from London, Ontario, Cam LaRock. What did you think?
Well, just to start off, amazing job yourself, Chuck. That was great. I sat there starstruck myself the whole time, having Paul on the show. Just an honor to be in the presence, even be involved in this is amazing. It was great. Paul, it's true what they say, a true professional, class act. I was able to watch some of his draft interviews. Like, for instance, I saw the one with Nick Robertson back in 2019, and you can just tell on Nick's face he's so nervous, and Paul just calms him right down. Just a class act. It's true what they say.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I didn't say this as well, and we're padding his stats and pumping his tires as well, but I think he deserves it. But when after COVID had hit, and Paul retired after that, I had a moment of real sadness, and I don't know why I had that moment of sadness, because Paul was kind to me. We weren't great friends as well. He was very kind to me and always knew my name, and but what I thought it was sad for is that people don't get to see how professional he is, how great the interviews he conducted. He'll be replaced by somebody else. To me, that just will never be able to fill those shoes. And I was really just sad. And I'm not even a Leaf fan. I'm kind of an anti-Leaf fan.
Yeah, I
But
can
I
say the
felt
same
bad
about
for,
myself.
first time I've ever felt bad for Leaf fans as well. It's like, oh, like the poor Leaf fans, losing round one. I've never been sad about that. But when they lose Paul Hendrick, I was like, I had a big moment of sadness of that as well. And just like being around the rink that I won't see him there as well. That was a little sad. So I was just overjoyed that he was joining us from Spain today. So
Well,
any more thoughts that you had?
that's all from me, Chuck. Anything else from you?
No, that's it. I just want to thank you for producing the show, Cam, as well. And thanks a lot to Paul Hendrick for coming on the show.
It's an
Thanks to
absolute pleasure.
our head sponsor, title sponsor, Johnny from Holy Chuck Burgers, and giving us that burger experience that you're going to get the meat sweats for. And I just want to say thanks a lot for coming on board, and we will see you guys next time.